And so when we think about, we've gone from a transition of essentially growing your own beef, utilizing draft animals. Then we began to see the cattle drives, and then we saw the changes there, and we began to see more organized grazing of cattle, and then we began to see the development of the feeding industry, and then we began to see where these animals were harvested over time as well. And so the early years, it was local when these cattle were harvested. Again, mom and pop, they had their own cattle that they fed, and they may harvest 1 or 2 animals per year. The other centers for beef slaughter initially before the Civil War, it was Cincinnati. After the Civil War, it became Chicago, and then the river cities. We began to see some of these harvest centers in other U.S. metropolitan areas. Essentially, those cattle had to be harvested close to where the people were because of lack of refrigeration and those types of things. And then currently, the processing facilities essentially are close to where the feed yards are, the feedlots are, so that those finished cattle don't have to be transported long distances. And so, as you'll see now, the major packing plants, processing facilities for cattle, they're going to be most of them are going to be in the Midwest, in the Panhandle of Texas and up north. And then we'll see some in other areas where there may be some smaller concentration of feeding areas. And so we begin to see the change in time of that as we become more specialized in how we produce cattle and those types of things. And then over time, as the cattle industry continues to evolve, we begin to see segments of the beef industry where we had the cow-calf producer, maybe the grazing or the stocker portion, and then finally the feeding side of that business. And those segments were very separated for a period of time. And now as we've gone into this century, we began to see more of those segments working together to produce the optimal type of animal and the most efficient way of doing it. So times have changed. The way we market cattle, and we'll talk about how we market cattle today off the ranch. And so later on in the semester, and some marketing opportunities. And so the cattle marketing's changed. Early on, it was the stockyards. Then from that point in time, we began to see the advent of the livestock markets or auctions, that we took those animals off the ranch, the calves off the ranch, and they were marketed through these livestock auctions. And they still are today. And a good portion of the cattle in the United States are marketed that way. But then times began to change, and the larger producers began to see some opportunities to directly market those cattle, maybe to the buyers, rather than to market them one by one, so they could market group load lots of cattle directly to the order buyers that were putting those cattle out on grass or maybe going directly to the feed yard. And then we began to see some options of video options and distant marketing. And so things have changed, and the market has changed over time of how we market cattle as well. One of the things, too, that as we look at our beef industry today, early on we thought about the United States beef industry as being just U.S. beef. We produced the beef that supported the citizens of the United States. But as time has changed and refrigeration and other shipping practices have become more efficient, air transportation, all of those factors come into play. Now we've got to think about the beef industry as a global industry now. And we see that oftentimes, and we hear that today, we're in a global market. And I think we are. We're in a global market, and there's a lot of opportunities in the beef side. And so we've got to think about the beef industry as a global beef industry. And there are many reasons for that is because, one, we're bringing beef product into the United States, and a lot of the product that we do bring into the United States from other countries is going to be lean. But then we also have that opportunity to export beef to other parts of the world. And oftentimes we think about those beef exports as just high quality product, maybe going into the Japan market, but we also have product that is exported that maybe is not consumed as readily here in the United States. And so we think about those things like, I always talk about one of the things that comes to mind is livers. And so if I ask the class, how many of you in here eat liver, a very small portion or percentage of the population really likes liver. And so we've got all these cattle with all this liver as a product that is consumable, and we do consume some in the United States, but now we need a market for that. And so one of our biggest importers of U.S. liver would be Egypt. And so we have liver and we have other products that are offal products or maybe even other cuts, beef ribs, short ribs, and those types of things that in other parts of the world they like that. It's part of their culture, and they've been able to, they consume that product. And so it gives us some additional value in that. The other reality is that the world population is growing. It's growing. We think it's growing fast here in the United States, but if we look at globally, most of the population growth is going to be outside the United States. And so as we want to be progressive and look towards the future of the beef industry, we look to the global side of it and look at the population abroad, because there's huge market opportunities out there. And it's expected as we go into 2050, so just about right now, about 35 years from now, we're looking at 9 billion people globally. And as times change and as we begin to see more and more of those countries where those people are becoming more developed, there's more disposable income in those countries, and so we begin to see those citizens there, they've acquired a taste for beef and other meat products. And so we're expecting to see that demand to continue to rise. And as you can see here, one of the things in this particular slide is we look at meat consumption and per capita income. As in those developing countries, there is more disposable income within the households. We begin to see that meat consumption or pounds of beef per capita increase in general, or in meat consumption increase in general. So there's lots of opportunities for that. As we begin to look at the growth of the U.S. beef industry, we really have to look at exports and what's out there. And again, it's not just our higher quality products, it's also our variety meats and other meats that come off of these products as well. So some things to think about there. One of the things that we have to look at is always we know we're going to import some product as long as that product's out there and it fits into the market, and most of the product we import is going to be a lean product. So we have to continue to look at that export market, because we want to make sure that we've got some opportunities outside of the United States to sell our product, to maintain our prices with that. And at times, if U.S. consumption drops down and maybe we see an influx in imports of our product, we can see some depressed prices. And we've seen that actually in 2015. We went from an all-time high to where we've lost significant value in those cattle. And just in about a 3-month period, we lost over $300 in value per calf and over $500 per cow in market value. So we've got to continue as a beef industry, look to and explore all of those opportunities that are around the world. Now, as we look at cattle numbers here in the United States, as we compare to the rest of the world, we are the leader in beef production. We do produce more beef than Brazil, the European Union, and China. And we produce more beef than those countries. And some people say, well, why do we always worry about Brazil and some of these other countries? Well, because they export a lot of product, and they are huge competitors. And so we've got to look to be competitive with them on the global side of things. Now, we consume a lot of beef here in the United States, and we consume most of what we produce. But we do have to look at those other countries and look at other opportunities around the world. So the U.S., we're big in beef production. We are the leaders in beef production. We're actually fourth globally in the exports in the amount of beef that's produced. And the top 4 of the exporters globally export about 68% of the product. India, Brazil, and Australia would be the top 3 exporters of beef, where U.S. would fall in 4th in line with that. And so some things to really think about there when we're talking about beef production there. The interesting thing when we're talking about production of beef, if we look at total beef produced, we may not be, we're number one in beef produced in tonnage, but we're not number one in the number of cattle, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. One thing that we always work with our ranchers on and visit with ranchers is to talk about the global meat market and how it really plays into the value of the calf. And so we've got a rancher that may be in South Texas that's marketing their calves at weaning. They may not see the value of the export market at that time on that particular calf, but every calf that's marketed, some of that value is contributed to the export. And back in 2011, the export value on a live animal, a finished animal, was about $200. And if you bring that back down to a weaned calf at the ranch, you're looking at about $100 in value. In today's market, in today's value, that's about 10% of the value of that calf. So even at the ranch level, where the production is, there's tremendous value in the export market, so we have to think about that. When thinking about the global beef herd, again, if we look at where the U.S. sits, Brazil is number one, and China would be number two, and U.S. would fall in number three, and then finally Argentina would be fourth in total numbers of beef cattle. Again, we're producing more tonnage with less animals. And a lot of that goes back to the production systems we have, our feeding system that we have, and our finishing system, but it also goes to the efficiency of our production. The technology that we've implemented, from genetic selection, trying to utilize better, more efficient cattle, we're able to produce more beef with less number of animals. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we talk about sustainability and less of a carbon footprint and less of a challenge on our environment. Those numbers really hold true and tell the true story of what we're trying to do here in the United States. And that's produce more beef with less animals and to be more efficient, to have less of a footprint on the environment.